My son told me I was uninvited from his wedding to protect his traumatized fiancée from my past as a cop. But my detective instincts knew the real trauma was in the 10-year-old cold case file I was about to reopen, and the fugitive's face I recognized was the one who got away. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. My son didn't want me to meet his fiancée. He said it was better if I didn't come to the wedding, so I followed him one day to see what he was hiding. When I saw her face, my heart nearly stopped. Retirement, I'd been told, was a quiet harbor. For me, Vivian Sterling, it was a Brooklyn brownstone, a sanctuary where the ghosts of my past were kept at bay by the comforting weight of 1,000 books. For 30 years, my world had been the cacophony of the New York City Police Department, the final 15 in the shadowed trenches of the Special Victims Unit. My life had been sirens, sterile interrogation rooms, and the hollow-eyed stares of people whose worlds had been fractured. Now the loudest sound was the clink of a teaspoon against a porcelain mug. My brownstone was my fortress, worth at least $3.5 million, and paid in full by a life I was desperate to leave behind. But you can take the detective out of the precinct. You can never take the precinct out of the detective. My observational habits remained, a muscle memory that refused to atrophy. I still scanned rooms, noted exits, and read the flicker of an eye that betrayed a thought. It was a game, a way to keep the blade of my mind from dulling. The quiet of my life was not empty. It was filled completely by my son, Michael. At 36, he was a man forged in a world away from mine. He was a chef, the celebrated proprietor of Aperture, a place in Soho where food was an art form. He had his father's kind heart and artistic soul, a gentle spirit that was both my greatest pride and my deepest fear. I had spent my life in the company of monsters. I knew how easily a gentle spirit could be broken. He was the one case I could never close. I had convinced myself I was just a mother now. I had no idea that my most important case, the one that would threaten the very foundation of my world, was about to walk right through my front door. He visited on a Tuesday, crisp and bright. He didn't call first. He had a key. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floors, then his voice, full of a bright, buoyant energy that lit up the house. "Mom, you here?" I turned from the orchid I was failing to save. He was standing in the doorway, glowing. It was the only word for it. He radiated a happiness so potent it was a physical presence in the room. His dark hair was messy, his chef's jacket unbuttoned, but it was his eyes that held me. They shone with a light I hadn't seen since he was a boy on Christmas morning. "Michael," I said, putting down the watering can, "what is it? You look like you just won the lottery." He laughed, a full, uninhibited sound. He crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted me off my feet. "Better," he muffled into my hair. "So much better." He set me down, his hands on my shoulders, his grin so wide it seemed to take up his whole face. "Mom," he began, taking a deep breath, "I'm getting married." A wave of pure maternal joy washed over me. This was it. The moment I had dreamed of. My son, my kind, brilliant son, had found his person. "Oh, Michael," I managed, my voice thick, "that's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you." We hugged again, long and tight. When we pulled apart, I pulled him toward the kitchen table. "Tell me everything. Who is she? What's her name?" He sat, thrumming with energy. "Her name is Gabrielle," he said, and the way he spoke it was a prayer. "Gabrielle Dubois. Gabby. And she's incredible, Mom. She's everything." He described her in a breathless rush. An art consultant, brilliant, cultured, witty, kind. They'd met at a gallery opening, a chance encounter that felt like destiny. He painted a picture of a woman who was not just perfect, but perfect for him. She sounds absolutely perfect, I said, my voice full of genuine warmth. I cannot wait to meet her. We must have her over for dinner immediately. This weekend. That was when the first shift occurred. The brilliant light in his eyes dimmed a fraction. A fleeting tension tightened his mouth. Well, he began, his voice losing its joy. That's the thing. She's very private. I tilted my head. Private? What do you mean? He shifted, suddenly finding the wood grain of the table fascinating. She's just a quiet person. The idea of a big family dinner, being the center of attention, it's a lot for her. She's not ready for that yet. The explanation felt thin. My old instincts pricked at me. Even the most private person meets their future mother-in-law. But I pushed the thought away. I would not mar this moment. Of course, I said, forcing a bright smile. We can do something smaller. Just the three of us. Whatever she's comfortable with. He looked up, and I saw a flicker of strained apology. Thanks, Mom. That would be better. But maybe not just yet. Let's give it a little time. He stood up, the conversation deliberately over. He gave me another quick hug, promised to call, and then he was gone. I stood alone in my quiet kitchen. The joy of his announcement still warmed me, but a new, cold little seed of confusion had been planted. It was a small thing, a tiny detail, but in my world, the world I had just retired from, it was always the small, insignificant details that ended up mattering the most. The days that followed were a strange mix of happiness and a low, persistent hum of unease. I replayed our conversation, dissecting it with the practiced skill of a detective. Michael's joy was real. His evasiveness was also real. The two didn't fit. I tried to silence the suspicious voice in my head. I was a mother, not an investigator. I had to trust his judgment. Gabrielle was probably just shy. It was a plausible explanation, but it didn't feel true. It felt like a line he had been fed. The call came 2 weeks later on a Thursday evening. I saw Michael's name on the screen and answered with a warm, "Hello, darling." His voice was tight, strained, laced with a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. "Hey, Mom, you got a minute?" "Of course," I said, closing my book. "Is everything all right?" The pause on the other end was heavy with unspoken words. "Everything's fine," he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. "It's just, well, Gabby and we've made a decision. We don't want a big wedding, all the fuss. It's not us. So we're just going to go down to City Hall next week. Just the two of us." My heart sank. I dreamed of his wedding day, but it was his choice. "Oh, well, that's certainly simple. If that's what makes you both happy, then I'm happy for you." I assumed just the two of us was a figure of speech. A mother was an exception. I was wrong. "Thanks, Mom," he said, the relief in his voice a profound gasp. "And that's the other thing I needed to talk to you about." He hesitated, taking a deep, shaky breath. "About the wedding. About you being there. We were talking, Gabby and and we just think it would be better if you didn't come." The words hit me with physical force, a punch to the gut that knocked the air from my lungs. I sat there, utterly speechless. My own son was uninviting me from his wedding. The rejection was so absolute, so profoundly hurtful, my mind couldn't process it. "Michael," I finally whispered, my voice raw. "What are you talking about?" "Why?" The words tumbled out in a rushed, defensive, and deeply rehearsed sounding torrent. "It's not about you, Mom. I swear. It's Gabby. She's had a really difficult life, a deeply traumatic past, things I can't even tell you about. And your past? Your career. It's intimidating for her. The idea of her new mother-in-law being a detective from the Special Victims Unit. It's just too much. It brings up too much for her. It would be less stressful if we just did this on our own. Please, Mom. I listened, my shock slowly, chillingly, being replaced by a cold, dreadful clarity. The explanation was elaborate. It was specific. It was, to my trained ears, utterly and completely preposterous. A woman so traumatized by a retired cop that she would ban her from her own son's wedding? It wasn't just an excuse. It was a work of fiction, a carefully crafted narrative designed for a single purpose: to keep me away. This wasn't shyness. This was a deliberate, strategic act of exclusion. And my son, my kind, loyal son, was her mouthpiece. He was being used, manipulated into inflicting a wound on his own mother. The mother in me was shattered, but the detective, the woman who had spent a lifetime listening to lies, was wide awake. And she was furious. After the call ended, I sat in the deepening twilight, the phone clutched in my hand. The searing pain receded, replaced by the cold, sharp certainty that I was being lied to. It was a sensation that started deep in my gut, a tight, coiling knot of intuition honed over 3 decades of interrogations. The next morning, I checked the joint account I still shared with Michael, a relic from his college days I'd never bothered to close. My blood ran cold. A charge from 3 days ago, a transfer of $25,000 to a holding company I'd never heard of. Aperture Consulting LLC. It was an artifact, a piece of evidence. My hand was shaking. I called Aperture, his restaurant. Maria, his longtime manager, answered. "Vivian, thank God. I'm so glad you called." Her voice was a strained whisper. "Maria, what's wrong? Is Michael there?" "No. Vivian, I'm scared. He's not himself. He's been pulling huge sums of money from the business accounts. We're going to miss payroll." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. This wasn't just an emotional exclusion. This was financial. This was an escalation. "Maria," I said, my voice dropping into the calm, steady tone of my old job. "How bad is it?" "He's drained the operating budget. He keeps talking about a new investor and refinancing, but he's just taking money out. Vivian, I think he's in trouble." I hung up, the 2 pieces of evidence slamming together in my mind. A secret fiancé, a ban from the wedding, a mysterious LLC, and $25,000 missing, on top of his restaurant being bled dry. The mother in me was shattered, but the detective, she was just given her mission. My quiet brownstone no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a command center. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was being consumed by a cold, familiar fury. My instincts were sounding a 5-alarm fire. The woman my son was about to marry was a liar. And if she was lying about this, she was lying about everything. I replayed Michael's words, not as a heartbroken mother, but as a detective evaluating a witness statement. The phrasing was key. Deeply traumatic past. It was generic, theatrical, designed to be unchallengeable. Intimidated by your past? It wasn't just an excuse. It was a weapon, forged from my own life and used against me. A brilliant, manipulative checkmate. Gabrielle had painted herself as a damsel in distress, a fragile creature who needed shielding, specifically from me. She had identified me as a threat and engineered my exile, using my own son as the instrument. This was the work of a predator. My fear was no longer for my own feelings, but for Michael. He wasn't just in love. He was under a spell. He was being managed, controlled, and isolated from the one person who had always been his fiercest protector. Confronting him was out of the question. He was too deeply enmeshed. A direct accusation would be dismissed as the jealous ramblings of a scorned mother. It would drive a wedge between us so deep it might never be repaired, and it would only isolate him further. I could not fight this with emotion. I had to fight it with facts. Cold, hard, irrefutable facts. My study transformed back into an investigation room. I unearthed a box from the back of a closet, a dusty time capsule. Inside were old notebooks, spare handcuffs, and a small, powerful pair of binoculars. Holding them felt like shaking hands with a ghost. My first step was surveillance. I needed to see her. I needed to watch her when her guard was down. I needed to see her face. The next morning, I called Michael. It was the most difficult call I've ever made. I forced a warmth and contrition into my voice that I did not feel. I told him I was sorry, that I had been selfish, and that all I wanted was his happiness. The relief that flooded his voice was a fresh, sharp stab of pain, but I bore it. It was a necessary deception. He was so grateful, so happy, that he became chatty. "I'm actually taking Gabby to a celebratory lunch this afternoon," he said, "to toast our new, stress-free wedding plans." He mentioned the name of the restaurant, a trendy new place in Chelsea. It was a careless mistake, born of his relief. For me, it was the first break in the case. Just as I was about to leave, a text message notification appeared on my phone. An artifact. It was from Michael. "Mom, thanks again for understanding. By the way, the bank might call you. I'm refinancing the restaurant, and they just need your signature as a reference. Just a formality." My blood turned to ice. A reference? Or a cosigner? He was moving on my finances. The pressure was escalating. He wasn't just isolating me. He was targeting my assets, starting with the restaurant, and now, inevitably, moving toward my home. The $3.5 million brownstone. I chose my clothes with care. A simple gray pantsuit, comfortable shoes, a scarf. I was not Vivian Sterling, retired mother. I was a shadow. I dug out an old tote bag and placed my binoculars and a camera with a telephoto lens inside, another relic from my box of ghosts. The adrenaline, a long-forgotten friend, was a low, steady hum in my veins. I drove to Chelsea, my old service weapon locked in the glove box. This was not a mother going to lunch. This was a detective on a hunt. I parked a few blocks from the Chelsea restaurant and found a small coffee shop directly across the street, a perfect vantage point. I chose a small table by the window, ordered a black coffee I had no intention of drinking, and settled in to wait. The tools of my old trade felt natural in my hands. The weight of the binoculars, the cool metal of the camera. It was a strange, unsettling kind of homecoming. I had spent countless hours like this, watching and waiting. An hour later, Michael's car pulled up. He got out, a wide, happy smile on his face, a man without a care in the world. He looked at his phone, and then his face lit up. A taxi had pulled up behind him, and from it emerged a woman. My breath caught. I raised the binoculars, my hand steady. The woman who stepped onto the curb was not the shy, fragile creature Michael had described. She was a vision of effortless, predatory elegance. She was tall, dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored cream-colored suit. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and oversized sunglasses concealed her eyes. She moved with a liquid, confident grace, a woman used to being looked at. Michael rushed to her, and she greeted him with a dazzling smile and a quick, almost performative kiss. There was nothing private or retiring about her. She commanded the space around her. They went inside. Through the plate glass window, I watched them talk. She was animated, touching his arm, laughing. It was a masterful performance of intimacy. But even from across the street, I could see the cracks. Her smiles didn't always reach her eyes. Her gaze would occasionally flicker away from Michael, scanning the restaurant with a quick bird-like motion. It was the subtle, restless watchfulness of a hunter, or of the hunted. I took a few pictures. The click of the shutter, a small, satisfying sound. After an hour, they emerged. Michael hailed her a taxi. As he held the door open, she took off her sunglasses to laugh at something he said. For the first time, I saw her eyes. They were a cool, intelligent, and utterly unreadable shade of blue. I followed Michael back to his restaurant. He was cheerful, focused, a man living in a beautiful, fragile dream. My heart ached for him. Late in the afternoon, he emerged, got in his car, and began to drive. This was not the route to his apartment. My instincts, now fully engaged, told me this was important. He drove to Chelsea, to the Crimson, a sleek, minimalist hotel known for its discretion. This was not where Gabrielle lived. This was a temporary place, a place for secrets. I parked across the street and waited. The hotel had a low-lit bar on the ground floor with floor-to-ceiling windows. A few minutes later, Michael walked in. He chose a secluded table and ordered a drink, a look of happy anticipation on his face. He was waiting for her. 10 minutes later, she appeared. She walked into the bar, not with tentative air, but with the confidence of a predator entering her hunting ground. She was dressed in an elegant black dress. She scanned the room, her cool blue eyes missing nothing. Then she saw Michael, and a brilliant smile transformed her face as she glided to his table. I watched them talk, her eyes locked on his, making him feel like the only person in the world. She was a master, a virtuoso of manipulation. Then it happened. She laughed at something he said, a bright, musical sound. She threw her head back, turning her face toward the large window, toward the street, toward me. The light from inside illuminated her features with a sudden, stark clarity. I zoomed the binoculars in, my fingers tightening on the focus wheel, my heart hammering against my ribs. In that moment, time fractured. The past and the present slammed together with the force of a physical collision. The polished woman in the black dress dissolved, and in her place I saw another face, a ghost from a decade ago, a face that had haunted my memory for years. My breath hitched. The binoculars slipped from my numb fingers. My heart nearly stopped. 10 years ago. I wasn't Vivian Sterling, retiree. I was Detective Sterling, SVU. I was standing in the opulent, violated living room of a penthouse on the Upper East Side. The victim, Alistair Finch, a kind, recently widowed art collector of 75, sat shaking on a silk chaise. His face was a canvas of bruises, his left eye swollen shut. He had met Angelica Rose on a high-end dating site. She was young, beautiful, and shared his passion for art. She had been charming, attentive, and made him feel young again. After a month of patient seduction, she had come to his apartment for dinner. She had refilled his champagne glass. That was the last thing he remembered. He woke hours later to the sound of his safe being drilled open. When he staggered in, he found not just Angelica, but a large, brutal man. Mr. Finch tried to fight back. The man beat him viciously, while Angelica, he sobbed, had simply watched, her angelic face a mask of cold, impatient indifference. They took everything. Over $2 million in rare coins, his late wife's jewelry, and every dollar from his accounts. Angelica Rose was a ghost. The name was an alias, the backstory a fabrication. We had one grainy surveillance photo, her face partially obscured. We never found her. The case went cold. It was the sheer predatory cruelty of the crime that haunted me. She hadn't just stolen his money, she had weaponized his grief against him. But I had never forgotten her face. My heart nearly stopped. It was her. Gabrielle Dubois was Angelica Rose. The woman in the bar was older, more polished, her hair a deep brunette instead of blonde. The disguise was nearly perfect, but a face is more than hair color. It's in the architecture. It was in the high, sharp cheekbones. It was in the elegant column of her neck. It was in the way her left eyebrow arched just slightly higher than her right when she smiled. It was a tiny, unique detail Mr. Finch had mentioned, a detail lodged in my memory. I staggered back, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the binoculars. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the car window, my mind reeling at the monstrous impossibility of it. Of all the con artists in a city built on reinvention, my son had found this one, the one from my past, the one who got away. The pieces of the puzzle, her traumatic past, her shyness, her pathological need to avoid me, slammed into place with horrifying logic. It wasn't a story to protect her fragile psyche. It was a brilliant, preemptive strike, a strategic masterpiece designed for one purpose: to keep her away from the one person on the entire planet who could recognize her face and connect her to a violent, unsolved felony. She hadn't been intimidated by my past as an SVU detective in some abstract way. She had been terrified of it. She had known from the moment Michael told her what his mother used to do that I was the single greatest threat to her new life, to her latest and most ambitious con. My son. He wasn't just a lover. He was the perfect cover. By marrying him, she was acquiring not just his wealth and status, but an invisible shield. Who would ever suspect that the fiancée of a celebrated chef, the future daughter-in-law of a decorated NYPD detective, was a fugitive from one of that detective's own cold cases? The irony was so twisted it was poetic. She was hiding in plain sight, in my own family. I drove home in a daze, stumbling into my study. I needed the file. I needed to be sure. But as I sat at my desk, the other pieces of evidence I'd found clicked into place, and the logic took a darker, more sickening turn. The $25,000 transfer, the Aperture Consulting LLC, the systematic draining of the restaurant, the text message about refinancing, needing my reference. My original theory, that she was hiding from me, was smart, but it was too simple. Then my phone rang. It was Maria, the restaurant manager. She was sobbing. "Vivian, he fired me. Michael fired me. He came in an hour ago, told me I was disloyal and to get out. He had security walk me out." This wasn't the act of a man under a spell. This was the act of a man covering his tracks. I stared at the Aperture Consulting LLC charge on my bank statement. I ran the name through a business registry database. It was a shell corporation. I looked at the incorporation date. It was dated 3 days after the gallery opening where Michael met Gabrielle. My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. He didn't meet her by chance. He found her. The consulting fee wasn't a theft. It was a payment. He had sought out a fixer, someone who could help him solve his financial problems. His restaurant was failing, and he was too proud to ask me for help, too entitled to accept failure. He had found Angelica Rose. The traumatic past story, the fear of my SVU career. It wasn't her idea to hide from me. It was Michael's idea. A story he crafted, using my own life as a weapon to isolate me, to push me out of the way so they could get to my assets. The $3.5 million brownstone was the real target. He wasn't her victim. He was her partner. And I was the mark. The world retilted. The betrayal was no longer peripheral. It was total. This wasn't manipulation. It was conspiracy. My son, my gentle artistic son, was a family antagonist, driven by a greed and shame I had never seen. My mission had changed. I wasn't saving an innocent. I was stopping a criminal. 2 of them. The next morning, I drove to my old precinct. The smell of stale coffee and disinfectant hit me like a wall. "Vivian!" My old partner, Dave Miller, grinned, standing up from his mountain of paperwork. As I live and breathe, don't tell me you're unretiring. We could use you. I wish it were that simple, Dave, I said, my voice low. I need a favor, a big one, off the books. His smile faded. What do you need? I had to lie. I need you to pull a cold case file, I said. SVU, about 10 years back, the Angelica Rose case. His eyebrows shot up. Angelica Rose. Jesus, Viv, I remember that one. The art collector. Drove you crazy. Why dig that up? I have a source, I lied, the deception tasting like ash. A credible tip. I think she might have resurfaced, with a new partner. It was enough. He led me down to the archives, the catacomb of the city's forgotten tragedies. He found the box and pulled the file. And there it was, in my own handwriting, Angelica Rose. It was all there. The victim statement from Alistair Finch, the crime scene photos, and the grainy surveillance photo. I placed one of the photos I'd taken outside the Chelsea restaurant next to it. Dave stared at the two pictures. Holy hell, Viv, he whispered. It's really her. The confirmation was a cold, grim satisfaction, but my real focus was the single line about the accomplice. Male, unknown, physically violent. I drove home, the file, a physical artifact of her crimes, heavy on the passenger seat. When I walked into my brownstone, my heart stopped for the second time in 2 days. Michael was sitting in my living room, waiting. Mom, he said. His voice was cold. Why did you go to the restaurant? Maria called me before I let her go. She said you were asking about the finances. He was testing me. The hunter was checking his trap. I forced a shaky maternal smile. Michael, you scared me. Firing Maria, draining the accounts. I was just worried. I want you to be safe. He watched me for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he softened. A performance of the son I used to know. I know, Mom, and I'm sorry I worried you. Everything is complicated. That's why I need your help. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. He slid them onto the coffee table. An artifact, a threat. It's a durable power of attorney, he said, his voice casual, too casual. With the wedding stress and the refinancing, it would make it so much easier for me to manage things, for both of us. Manage things. Manage my brownstone, my $3.5 million nest egg. He was trying to get legal control of everything I owned. Michael, I said, my voice a whisper, this is a very big step. Are you sure? His eyes hardened. The mask slipped. If you trust me, Mom, you'll sign it. If you don't, well, maybe Gabrielle is right about you. Maybe you are still trying to be a cop instead of a mother. He was using the lie he created as a threat. I stalled, my mind racing. Let me read it over, Michael. My lawyer should just take a look. A formality. He stood up, his jaw tight. He was angry but thought he was winning. Fine, but soon, Mom. The bank is waiting. He left. I stared at the POA, a declaration of war written in legalese. He thought he was the partner. He thought he was in control. But I was staring at the line in the cold case file. Male, unknown, physically violent. Gabrielle was the weapon. Michael was the hand on the trigger. But who was the other man in the file? And was he still in the picture? The POA document sat on my desk like a ticking bomb. The next morning, Michael called. Have you signed it yet? My lawyer is just reviewing the fine print. I lied. You know how they are. I could feel his impatience radiating through the phone. My mission had changed again. Michael was a lost cause for now, a co-conspirator. But he was not violent. The accomplice in the file was. Was Michael a partner? Or just the next victim in a longer con? I couldn't ask Dave to run a search on a 10-year-old ghost. I had to go back to the source. I had to find Alistair Finch. I called in another favor, this time from a retired records clerk. Within an hour, she had an address. Mr. Finch was no longer in his penthouse. The financial devastation had been too complete. He was in a modest retirement community in Westchester. The drive up was somber. The man I remembered as vital and proud, even after the assault, was now a ghost of his former self. He was in a wheelchair, his body made frail by the intervening decade. "Detective Sterling," he said, his voice a papery whisper. His eyes, though clouded, were still sharp. We sat in a quiet corner of the garden. I told him gently, directly, that I had found her. The color drained from his face. His hand trembled. "Angelica," he breathed, the name a curse. "Alistair, I need your help. I don't just need you to identify her. I need to know about him. The man who was with her. The one who hurt you." Alistair's eyes squeezed shut. The trauma was as fresh as if it were yesterday. "He was a monster," he whispered. She just watched. He had a tattoo on his neck. A scorpion. A new clue, a vital one. I raced home. This I could take to Dave. I called him. "Dave, I have a new lead on the Angelica Rose case. The accomplice. He has a scorpion tattoo on his neck." "I'm on it," he said. An hour later, he called back. His voice was grim. "You opened a real can of worms, Viv. The tattoo got a hit. Marco Scorpion Velez. A career violent, armed robbery, assault, extortion. He was arrested on an unrelated charge, did 8 years. He got out 6 months ago. 6 months ago, just before Michael met Gabriel. A cold dread washed over me. I had to know. I went back to the Crimson Hotel, back to the same parking spot. I waited. At 10 p.m., Michael and Gabriel walked out, laughing. They kissed, and Michael drove off. Gabrielle went back inside. I waited. The micro clock in my head was ticking. An hour later, a man stepped out of a taxi and walked into the hotel lobby. He was big, moved with a dangerous swagger, and wore a high-collared jacket. But as he passed under the light, he turned his head. On his neck, just above the collar, I saw the black-inked tail of a scorpion. He went straight to the elevator. He was going up to her room. The real reversal hit me. Gabrielle was playing Michael. She was still with her violent partner. Michael wasn't her co-conspirator. He was just the next mark, a gullible fool with a rich mother. He thought he was the partner, but he was just the key. The key to my $3.5 million brownstone. My son wasn't a partner in crime. He was just the next fool in her line, and he'd just invited a violent felon into our lives. The board had changed completely. I was back to saving my son, not just from financial ruin, but from a violent criminal who had already beaten one man half to death. And to save him, I first had to destroy his fantasy. I had to show him, in undeniable terms, who he was in bed with. The plan began to form, a risky piece of emotional theater. First, I went back to Westchester. "Alistair," I said, sitting opposite him in the garden. "I know what I'm about to ask is beyond measure. I found her, and her partner, Marco Velez, is with her. They are targeting my son." He was silent for a long time, his frail hands gripping the arms of his chair. I thought he would refuse. Then he looked at me, and I saw a flicker of the proud man he used to be. "She took everything from me, Detective," he said, his voice gaining strength. "My money, my health, my wife's memory. She cannot be allowed to do that to your son. She cannot be allowed to win again. I will do it." Second, I went to Dave Miller. I walked into the precinct and laid the entire case on his desk. The cold case file, the new photos of Gabrielle, the photo of Marco Velez, the POA document, the bank statements. They're targeting my son, Dave, and they're planning to use this POA to steal my house. The accomplice is violent and he's here. I'm setting a trap, and I need you to be there. Dave's face was grim. It's her. And it's him. My God, Viv. I'll have a tactical team on standby. You give the word, we move in. Third, I had to bait the trap. This required the performance of my life. I called Michael. My voice was a carefully calibrated instrument of warmth and reconciliation. Michael, darling, I've been thinking. You're right. I've been difficult. Your happiness is all that matters. Oh, Mom, he said, the relief in his voice palpable. Thank you. That means everything. As a wedding gift, I continued, my voice bright, I want to take you and Gabriel out to a proper celebration dinner. Just the three of us. My blessing. He was hesitant. Mom, I don't know. Gabby is busy and I still need you to. I signed it, Michael, I said, cutting him off. This was the bait. The brownstone was the bait. The power of attorney. It's on my desk, signed and notarized. Come pick it up after dinner. This is my apology. The hook was set. Okay, Mom, he said, all warmth again. Okay, that's great. We set the date for the following evening. I chose the restaurant, La Stella, an old-school Italian place in the West Village, known for its quiet, intimate, dimly lit booths. I arrived half an hour early with Mr. Finch. Dave had arranged a discreet transport. We sat at a secluded corner table, his wheelchair tucked to one side. The tension was thick, palpable. He was nervous, but his eyes were filled with a grim determination. You are a very brave man, Alistair, I said softly. He simply nodded. My phone vibrated. A text from Dave, an artifact. Team is in place? We have eyes on Velez. He's in a car, half a block down. He's circling. Be ready. The microclock was ticking. At 8:04 sharp they arrived. I saw them through the etched glass door, laughing, Michael's arm draped around Gabrielle's shoulders. They looked radiant, invincible. My heart ached. This was the last time I would ever see my son look so happy. They stepped inside. Michael spotted me, and his face broke into a wide, relieved smile. He led Gabrielle toward our table. Mom, this is so great of you. Gabrielle offered me a smile that was a masterpiece of victorious charm. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Vivian, she said, her voice as smooth as silk. I stood up, my own face a mask of maternal warmth. The pleasure is all mine. I then gestured to the quiet, elderly man sitting at the table. Michael, Gabby, I said, my voice calm and even. Before we order, I'd like you to meet an old friend of mine. This is Alistair Finch. Time slowed. For a fraction of a second, Gabrielle's polite smile remained frozen. Her eyes flickered to the man in the wheelchair with casual dismissal. Alistair Finch looked up. His gaze lifted and met the face of the woman who had haunted his life for 10 years. A tremor ran through his frail body. A small, choked gasp escaped his lips. He saw past the dark hair, past the expensive dress, and he saw the angel who had destroyed him. Angelica, he whispered. The name landed with the force of a bomb. Gabrielle's face shattered. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving a waxy ashen pallor. Her brilliant blue eyes widened in pure animal terror. The mask didn't just slip. It was violently ripped away, revealing the panicked, cornered con artist beneath. Michael stared, his smile collapsing, his face a canvas of utter confusion. He looked from the terrified old man to the chalk-white, guilty face of the woman he loved. What? He stammered. What did he call you? Who's Angelica? I don't know what he's talking about, she choked out, her voice a thin, reedy thing. He's mistaken. But it was too late. The lie was transparent. Michael's confusion began to curdle into a dawning, sickening horror. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading question. And for the first time, he saw not a jealous mother, but a detective. The door of the restaurant swung open, the bell chiming. It wasn't Dave. It was Marco Velez. He saw the scene. The old man, the white-faced Gabrielle, the confused son, and he knew the con was over. He saw the plainclothes cops moving from the bar. He was not running. He was coming for his partner. Marco Velez filled the doorway, his eyes sweeping the room. The scorpion tattoo was a black smear on his neck. "Angie," he snarled, "we've got a problem." Michael spun around, looking from Alistair to the terrified Gabrielle, to this new terrifying man. "Gabby." "Who is this?" "Move!" Marco lunged, not for the door, but for Gabrielle. He grabbed her by the arm. "We're leaving." He pulled a glinting 9-inch blade from his jacket. My body moved before my mind did. The 30 years of training took over. "NYPD!" I shouted, my voice a parade ground command that echoed through the restaurant. "Drop the weapon!" It was a bluff. My gun was in the car, but the voice of command, made him flinch. It was the moment of decision. Marco shoved Gabrielle at Michael. "Grab him! He's our ticket out!" And Gabrielle, Angelica Rose, cornered and desperate, did it. She grabbed a steak knife from the table and seized Michael from behind, yanking his head back, pressing the blade to his throat. "Don't move, Vivian," she shrieked, "or I'll kill him." That was the moment, the final horrifying reveal. Michael, his eyes wide with terror, stared at me. He saw it. The woman he loved, the woman he had conspired with, was willing to murder him to escape. His entire world, his fantasy, his greed, and his shame, shattered in a single silent scream. "Gabby, no," he choked out. That was the distraction. That was the microsecond Dave Miller's team needed. The kitchen doors burst open. The real tactical team, the one Marco hadn't seen, flooded the room. "Police! Police! Drop the knife! Drop it now!" Marco lunged for the front door, but 2 officers tackled him, sending a table of plates and glasses crashing to the floor. Gabrielle shrieked, the knife wavering. "It's over, Angelica," I said, my voice calm, walking toward her. "He's down. You have nowhere to go." She stared at me, her face a mask of pure abject defeat. The knife clattered to the floor. She slumped, a puppet with its strings cut, as Dave Miller himself pulled her hands behind her back. The quiet, final click of handcuffs was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The cold case was, at long last, closed. I turned to my son. Michael had staggered against the wall, his body rigid with shock, his face as pale as hers had been. He stared at the empty space where she had been, his world reduced to a single, vacant, bloody spot. He looked hollowed out. Across the room, Alistair Finch was weeping silently into his hands, a decade of grief and anger finally being released. The days that followed were a blur of heavy silences. We retreated to the sanctuary of my brownstone. Michael was broken. He learned the whole ugly story of Alistair Finch, of the violence, of the man who had been waiting in the wings. He was not just heartbroken. He was consumed by a shame so profound he could barely speak. A week after the arrest, we were in my study. The POA, unsigned, was still on my desk. I picked it up and tore it in half. "Michael," I said, not as a cop, not as a victim, but as his mother. "The LLC, the bank applications, the POA. You weren't just her victim. You hired her." He flinched, but he didn't deny it. He finally broke. The confession spilled out, a torrent of shame and fear. The restaurant was failing. He was over $500,000 in debt. He was going to lose Aperture, his father's legacy, everything. He was too ashamed to tell me. He found fixers online. He met Gabrielle. She promised she could solve his problem by unlocking his inheritance, my brownstone. She'd convinced him it was a gray area, a simple asset transfer to leverage against the debt. He was desperate. He believed her. I never knew about Marco, he whispered, his voice cracking. I never knew what she was. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to fail you. He was a family antagonist, but one driven by a fear of scarcity and a terrible, prideful shame. He finally turned to me, his eyes clear for the first time in months, filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. All that time, he said, his voice quiet and raspy. You knew. You were trying to protect me. And I hurt you. I tried to rob you. She was a professional, Michael, I said softly. She fooled men far more worldly than you. He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. She didn't fool you, he said. He looked around my quiet, book-filled study at the woman sitting across from him. And I think for the first time in his life, he saw me, not just as his mother, but as the woman I truly was, a protector, a hunter, a quiet warrior who had gone into battle one last time for him. The chasm that Gabrielle and his own choices had created between us was gone. In its place was a new, stronger, and more honest foundation, built on a terrible truth. My son was safe. The ghost of my most haunting case was finally at rest. I was, at long last, retired. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.